Long before the age of the hobbits, Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor, persuaded the master elvensmiths to forge great rings of power. These he gave to dwarves, elves, and men. The rings made their owners very powerful, but also greedy. Secretly, in the fiery cracks of Mount Doom, Sauron forged the One Ring to dominate all the others. He lost the One Ring, and it was not found again for 2,500 years. Gollum, diving in the river Anduin, discovered it, and Bilbo now possessed it. And whenever he wore it, not only did he become invisible, but the eye of Sauron sought him out and followed his every move.
See a field below. I wish I'd hear a rooster crow. But there are none who live downtown, and so the day starts out so slow. Again, the sun was never called, and darkness spreads over the snow like ancient bruises. I'm awake to feel the ache, but I wish I'd see a field below. I wish I'd see a field below.
I suppose Paul for us is a very English character. He lives in an urban surroundings or suburban surroundings in a modest house, and in many ways is absolutely a person of those surroundings. He's not really a traveller. He's very happy within that environment, which makes him a good, honest, ordinary citizen in that respect. But in his mind, he travels to great places and wonderful places. If you met him in his own environment, you'd say, if you met him down the pub, he'd just be another solid citizen in the pub having a drink. But if you meet him through his art, then you enter his mind and you're taken away by this extraordinary vision. And so we are privileged to know such people, because great egos are one thing, but people who just get down and do it and give us the opportunity to enjoy what they do so well is quite another matter.
Well, it doesn't seem like, he doesn't live on the West Bank or anything. It seems a bit, it seems a bit like an ordinary guy really that has a lot of talent, hidden talent really. Because if you were to meet him in a pub or, at the cricket field or something, you wouldn't really think that he was an artist actually. He doesn't wear, the coat on the shoulders and the straw hat.
Melkor, or Morgoth as he later became known, had been one of the most powerful of the Divine Lords. After his fall from grace, he became the Dark Lord, master of the evil wizard Sauron, and the great enemy of the Middle-earth. Ungoliant was the Gloom Weaver, Melkor's evil spider, who he used to attack the two light-giving trees of Valinor, creating a profound darkness before the sun and moon. Of all of Ungoliant's multitude of descendants, the last alive was Shelob, the petrifying spider, who became the last adversary to Frodo at the end of his quest on Mount Doom. Glaurung was an extremely devious dragon. Not only did he have great powers, but he used them in the most cunning way. He was the father of all the wingless, fire-breathing dragons. Melkor had bred him to lead his armies, and he defeated all who stood in his way.
Whenever you go round to Paul's, the music will be throbbing because it's his inspiration of, obviously, of what he's doing on canvas. That's where his feeling comes into.
Within himself as a person, he's not an outgoing individual. He likes his privacy and you know, he's got a remarkable talent, not only for his artwork, but also for his entrepreneurism, I suppose, with respect to the festivals and everything else that he's into. So, you know, he's almost a bit of a recluse to a degree, but yeah, with that special something, I think. But yeah.
You don't know any different because that's your dad and that's how you've grown up with him. You know, I just have visions of lots of loud music being played and him being painting away. And sometimes when I'd have friends over, it's like, oh, you know, that music's loud.
We didn't really see him much because he was in the studio all the time, and just the sound of the bass, boom, boom, boom.
That's all you'd hear through the sort of floorboards because it was upstairs, the actual studio he had. So you'd hear it downstairs, and it was.
But that was the norm. It wasn't a problem. That was just the way. That's just the way it was.
I was born in Derby. I lived here all my life, so I went to school in Derby as well. So you could say I was Derby born and bred. So, you know, I was married very young. I was 19 when I got married, so I was a teenager. You know, I had a young family, so I had to do. You know, I was in the furnishing trade and I was painting at the same time. And then it was only a few years after that I decided to open my own gallery and move more creatively into the art side of it.
Dragons were extremely dangerous. Only the exceptionally brave or foolhardy would seek them in their lairs, and there was little chance of returning to tell the tale. Gandalf, Bilbo and the hobbits scaled the lonely mountain to find the secret door, the entrance to the cave where Smaug the dragon kept his huge hoard of treasure, which long ago he had stolen from the dwarves. Far, far down under the lonely mountain, Smaug, a great winged dragon of the Middle-earth, and one of the last of his kind, lay snoring atop an immense heap of astounding treasure. Bilbo Baggins bravely put on the One Ring and, invisible, descended into the dragon's lair. To prove his daring, he took an insignificant cup from the great pile of treasure. Although Smaug possessed innumerable riches, he knew every piece, large and small. Enraged at the theft, he chased the hobbit through the tunnels and smashed his way out of the mountain. When the furious Smaug flew out of the lonely mountain, he vented his rage by attacking Lake Town. And here he met his end, pierced by an arrow. Now the treasure was unguarded, and orcs, accompanied by wargs, who were giant wolf-like creatures, marched to seize it. The dwarves called on the help of the elves and humans to defend their ancient birthright. Bjorn was an ancient sorcerer, large, black-haired and powerfully strong, who lived in between the Misty Mountains and Mirkwood. He could change his shape into a great bear. And on hearing of the orc invasion which threatened his land, he charged into battle, crushing the orc troops, killing Bolg, their leader.
We got married, I was 17, Paul was 19. And yes, it was early. And at that time, he was working and he did paint very, very prolifically. He would always pack his lunch bag up and off he popped, and he'd be gone for perhaps a day. He first did an exhibition locally in Derbyshire, one of the art galleries in Derbyshire, and it was of a landscape, just an ordinary landscape, and he was over the moon because it sold, and at that time it sold for about £75, which to us was a lot of money. And he's always read, for as long as I know, and that's going back to the late 60s, the Tolkien trilogy. He knew it inside out. The idea basically was to actually produce a series of paintings to see how my work developed over a period of years. And I wanted to do it as a theme. So I picked The Lord of the Rings as a series of paintings. I'd always liked the imagery. When you read a book, you know, you get your own sort of little imagery back there, you know, it's never always definite, you know. This is why it's always difficult when you're painting a story as, you know, as definite as The Lord of the Rings, because people have their own ideas about, you know, how things should look.
Bilbo Baggins, keeper of the One Ring, decided to throw a magnificent party for the hobbits of the Shire on his 11th birthday. It was held in Hobbiton, under the party tree. At the height of the festivities, Bilbo put on the One Ring, which made him invisible, and he disappeared from the Shire forever, leaving the magic ring to his heir, Frodo. Many, many years before, when Bilbo was young and courageous, he had set off on a treasure hunt with Gandalf the Wizard and a company of dwarves. During several hair-raising adventures, whilst escaping from a goblin's cave, Bilbo fell down a hole and was separated from his companions. Groping his way down a murky tunnel, he felt a ring between his fingers, and he put it in his pocket. Gollum, the cave dweller, an unpleasant and slimy creature, decided to play with the hobbit by asking him riddles. "If you win," Gollum whined, "I will show you the way out. And if you lose, I will eat you." Bilbo failed the test, and in his nervousness slipped on the ring, the One Ring, and became invisible, thereby making his escape. At Bilbo's 11th birthday party, Gandalf the Wizard threw an enchanted firework display for the ancient hobbit in honour of their great adventure of many years before. Soon after Gandalf and Bilbo had left the safety of Hobbiton on their heroic journey, they came across 3 stone trolls. These were a dangerous and unpleasant creation of the Dark Lord. fashioned from the very substance of the mountains. They dwelt in caves and could only venture outside in the dark. To be caught in the sunshine meant an instant and permanent return to stone, which is why Gandalf tricked them into arguing amongst themselves until the sun came up.
We did, in fact, have a lot of dealings with the actual Tolkien Society, and they did very much back the work that he was doing.
Back in those days, I had, a better connection with the Tolkien Society and stuff like that. They even had meetings at my house and things. So, I suppose in a way that I was fairly unique for doing the type of stuff I was doing then, because there really weren't that many artists doing Tolkien. Where there are hundreds now apparently, films and everything else. So, but Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings book, has been inspirational to my generation and many others since.
Glamdring, the magic sword of the elves, was lost for 1,000 years. It was found by Gandalf in the Troll's cave after they had been turned to stone. He kept it and used it to detect orcs and the Balrog, as it glowed in the dark whenever they were near. Goblinton was deep, deep, deep under the high pass of the Misty Mountains, ruled by the great Goblin. Bilbo and the hobbits ventured into the treacherous passageways of the mountain, only to be captured and brought before the Goblin King. Thankfully, they were rescued by Gandalf wielding Glamdring, who in the confusion that followed killed this cruel and monstrous ruler. On his next great quest, Gandalf, together with Frodo, the new ring-bearer, and the Fellowship of the Ring, Boromir and Aragorn, Legolas the elf, Gimli the dwarf, and the hobbits, Merry, Pippin and Sam, attempted to cross the Misty Mountains by the pass at Redhorn Gate. An unseasonable and vicious blizzard sent by malevolent forces turned them back, and they were forced to seek another way.
A major difference between Paul's paintings and many other Tolkien illustrators or artists' paintings is that he does not paint exactly what Tolkien writes, but his own image of it, his own interpretation, I guess. And he's certainly doing this because he wants to give the beholder an image of his own vision of Middle-earth, and an image of Middle-earth perhaps, which is not bound to what Tolkien writes, but is more general in connection with the world of Tolkien.
He enters Tolkien's world, and as he moves around Tolkien's world in his head, he adds himself into the imagery. Just as when we look at one of Paul Gregory's paintings, we visually enter into his paintings. And it's not just Paul Gregory's painting, it's us within the painting. So each stage, from Tolkien to Paul Gregory to us, has another human being and element in it, which is wonderful.
But he always said, and I think even now, he would never ever go and see the film itself, because it's all his own interpretation onto canvas.
To avoid the Eye of Sauron, the Fellowship of the Ring decided on the dangerous route through the mines of Moria. Far down in the subterranean depths of the Misty Mountains, they fought with trolls and orcs, until they encountered the most fearsome of all of Morgoth's creatures, the Balrog. On the narrow bridge of Khazad-dûm, Gandalf fought this terrifying nightmare and struck it with his staff. In the midst of this life and death struggle, the bridge crumbled, and they fell into the unfathomable depths.
Well, I've known Peter for for many years now, and it's been a bit of a rocky marriage at times, but he's a great guy, and I have the greatest respect for him. He says what he thinks, regardless. I sometimes think he doesn't think what he says, but that's my opinion, and he'll have a different take on that.
If it wasn't for Peter, he probably wouldn't have the luxury to be able to paint the way he's been able to paint, because Peter's basically financed the project, his life's work. And the fact that Peter's managed to keep the collection together, there's very few artists that can say, this is where the majority of my life's work is.
The unique relationship between Paul and I is that we have an artist who didn't need to be well known for his paintings in the traditional sense, be built up into a great superstar. And we had a dealer who was in no hurry to sell them, because it was part of a process which would happen when it happened. In other words, when I felt comfortable and the time was right, when the time was right, we would have an exhibition.
Not so long after Frodo and the hobbits had left the safety of the Shire, Tom Bombadil came to their rescue when Old Man Willow had entangled them in his branches. Tom was an ancient and mysterious man of the woods who had lived forever in harmony with the animals and trees, and had authority over them. Tom and his wife Golberry gave the hobbits shelter and sound advice before directing them on their way. The reputation of the Barrow Downs was of a place of dread and fear. It was a place where no hobbit would readily venture. Lost in the fog, Frodo's intrepid band of hobbits drifted between the prehistoric burial mounds which had long been occupied by Barrow Wights, evil spirits sent to possess the empty graves. Tom Bombadil had advised Frodo to avoid the Barrows, but after they had become disorientated, they were captured by a dreaded Barrow Wight. Frodo escaped certain death by summoning Tom Bombadil, who exorcised the malevolent spirit with a song.
John is round the corner from here. He has worked for friends of mine, not just on frames, but actually carving great beams for 17th century castles and that sort of thing. So it seemed to me, when I got to the stage of actually having a pot of money where I could allocate it to framing these pictures, and that I wanted to bolt on to Paul's fantasy and make it really work, that John was the person to go to.
Peter came with a number of photographs. I think at the first time there was about 20, and said, "What do you see around these?" And I'm never very good at being asked, bang, what do you see, answer like that. So I said, "Peter, can I take these away and put some suggestions around them, bring them to you for you to make a choice?" Judy did, returned. He made some alterations, accepted some, wanted others modified, and that's how it started.
I have to say the framing is pretty spectacular and very stunning, and John Davis done a brilliant job of that.
One couldn't miss the opportunity of putting some skulls in to be tumbling out, and here they are, slightly about 3/4 size, pretty accurate, and enjoyed by everybody who carved them in the factory.
My purpose was to make these great Gothic paintings live by complementing them with the frames. Having done it and having framed the pictures, I then sent Paul the images. And when we first showed the paintings in this state venue in France, it was the first time Paul and I had ever seen them on the wall. I mean, and he was absolutely blown away, which is the way it should be.
Boromir, a noble warrior of kingly bearing and one of the Fellowship of the Ring, convinced himself that possession of the One Ring would restore his kingdom. When he demanded it, Frodo refused him and in fright put it on. The Fellowship sent out search parties to find the now invisible hobbit, during which Merry and Pippin were attacked by orcs, and Boromir came to their rescue and, despite killing a large number of their assailants, was pierced with many arrows and slain. Aragorn, after he heard a thunderous blast from Boromir's great horn of Gondor, rushed to his rescue, only to find he was too late. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli set Boromir's body with his weapons and those of the orcs that he had killed in a boat. They launched him towards the falls of Rauros, so that the river Anduin would honourably bury him. The river Anduin began its long journey between the Misty Mountains and the Grey Mountains. It was the longest river in the Middle-earth, 1,388 miles long. And here in the north, in ancient times, the One Ring was lost beneath its lucid waters. Lothlorien, the magical forest of the elves, nestled within its widening valley. Onward it flowed through the land of Rohan, beneath the White Mountains, passing the immense walls of Minas Tirith, and then at last into the Great Sea. The most potent of inspirations underlying British art is a deep spiritual love of the countryside. The celebrated romantic landscape painters of Britain were all intensely steeped in England's green and pleasant land. Turner, John Constable, Wright of Derby, Samuel Palmer, Ford Madox Brown, to name but a few. So when we compare Paul Gregory's vision to those of his artistic predecessors, we place him within a tradition of artists inspired by the heartbreaking beauty of their surroundings.
People do actually make the comment that there's a similarity between, or influence between, that I am with John Martin, the English painter. I think that's got to be a subliminal one as opposed to one that I'm aware of. So I do like his work, but it's not something I'm conscious of trying to emulate. If I were to be influenced by a painter, it would be more by Joseph Wright and the way he's contrasts with light and dark, which I think is a stunning painter. But he was a portrait painter mostly, and some of his landscapes quite surreal. And I think I tend to lean towards his work, certainly the style of his paintings, than necessarily John Martin.
Det finns flera länkar som kopplar samman Gregory med det historiska måleriet. Och den första som jag skulle peka på, det är det stora formatet. Så därför kan man inte se ett tryck av bilderna och uppleva bilden som man upplever den i verkligheten när man står framför bilden. Det är väldigt svårt att återge de bilderna i reproduktioner.
The Rohirrim came from Rohan, a fertile pastureland between Isengard and the White Mountains. Famous for their skill with horses in both peace and war, and under the leadership of Theoden, their king, 6,000 rode out to aid the defence of Minas Tirith at the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Minas Tirith, the White City, was the capital of the Lords of Gondor. It was surrounded by 8 monumental defensive walls and was protected at the rear by Mount Mindalluin. To its east it faced Pelennor Fields. Sauron's dark forces besieged the city and set fire to its fortifications, while his Nazguls flew low over the walls, terrifying the defenders with their piercing screams. When the Witch King decided that the defences of Minas Tirith were at last vulnerable, he ordered his forces to bring forth their colossal battering ram, Grond. Orcs gave way to the great trolls, the only warriors strong enough to wield it. 3 times it took Grond to pound the massive doors before they gave way, and then the Witch King entered. Confronted by Gandalf astride Shadowfax and alarmed by the mighty blast of the Horn of Rohan, the Lord of the Nazgul retreated. Theoden, king of the Rohirrim, came to defend Minas Tirith at the head of 6,000 mounted cavalry. At the Battle of Pelennor Fields, he led the charge and slew the chieftain of his enemies. It was then that the evil and terrifying Witch King of Angmar, known as the Lord of the Nazgul, attacked him, and so frightened his horse Snowmane that Theoden was thrown and crushed beneath the wounded animal. His daughter Eowyn and Merry the Hobbit rushed to his rescue, and though they were too late to save the king, they destroyed his enemy.
Well, the whole point of an exhibition is that everybody creating that exhibition, because the artist's already done his work, the framer's already done his work. The next great creative event is putting the exhibition together. So the first thing must be that everybody is enthusiastic. And then there has never been a time when everybody involved in this exhibition has not been enthusiastic. All the way through, and the greatest excitement came for them when they actually physically saw the paintings as they came out of the crates. And then when they had an idea where they wanted to hang them, but they had the paintings to play with and hang them. Then comes along the lighting man who understands what he's got to do, but what he did brilliantly was to light the pictures and not the frames. This was very important, because ultimately the frames are only there to draw you into, to give you the mood of the paintings, to enhance the paintings. The frames may be works of art in their own right, but they are not works of art in their own right according to this picture. They are appendages to the paintings. And the result is that with all that enthusiasm, with all that talent, the exhibition looks marvellous.
The most romantic of all the museums in Stockholm is situated in the former residence of the king's brother, Prince Eugene, the beloved artist and patron. Built in 1905, it stands overlooking Stockholm Sound on the royal island of Djurgården. Here in 2007, the most popular exhibition of the summer was presented to an entranced Swedish public.
Would have been lower down, personally, from a general perspective.
we used to have persons in my own age, mostly females, which are fantastic visitors for the museum. And now we have a lot of youngsters, which is not so often seen here. And it's very interesting because the young people, the kids are pointing to the paintings, telling their parents or the adults what they are supposed to see. It used to be the other way around, so that's very amusing. And I can also tell you that in April we have only been open a few weeks. We had more than twice as many youngsters as the whole last year. So now it's I think we have had a couple of thousands really. And this is very unusual for this museum.
Above the Morannon, the massive iron black gate of Mordor, built to seal the haunted pass of Cirith Gorgor, orc sentinels patrolled the heights. Far beneath on the valley floor, Aragon's warriors were locked in conflict with Sauron's hellish army in the last bloody battle of the war. The plan of attack had been devised to deflect Sauron from Frodo's final task on Mount Doom. In the blazing cracks of Doom, Sauron forged the One Ring, the center of his power, and into this hellish furnace the One Ring must be cast to destroy his supremacy. This was the burden that Frodo had accepted. The quest to fulfill his promise had been long and arduous and fraught with danger. At the very edge, the power of the One Ring overcame him. Gollum, desperate to save the ring from destruction, bit it from Frodo's finger, but in the confusion that followed, fell with it into the fiery flames. Frodo's mission had been accomplished, and Sauron's dark power destroyed.
Without doubt, Peter was the force for the exhibition. He organised all that and the framing and everything else, and for that, I'm very thankful. The exhibition looks stunning. It was a beautiful setting to start with. I just loved the greyness of the city, and we sort of drove up to the museum. Really had no idea of what was actually going to go off inside. And when I actually went and saw the exhibition, the way it was lit, and the way they actually displayed the paintings, and it just looked spectacular with the framing and everything else. So I was very impressed. So I appreciate the amount of work that actually went into getting that exhibition to look the way it did. And the feeling for me was, it was fantastic. I was very proud that I was part of it. And it's not just me; it's Peter, it's John with the framing, and the museum, the way they've actually displayed it, and the amount of work they put into it, which is colossal.
Long after his return to the Shire, Frodo remained haunted by his ordeals on Mount Doom. He decided to accompany the elves on their journey to the Blessed Isle, and thus sailed away with them from the Grey Havens, saying farewell forever to Merry, Pippin and Sam. The memories of Frodo's heroic quest to save the Middle-earth were never to leave him. Happiness and nightmares intermingled, unbreakable bonds of companionship pitted against overwhelming dark forces, purity of spirit defending a primeval love of the land, conquering weakness in the face of malevolent power, a happy ending with bittersweet memories.
the one